These hands, wrinkled and calloused, move slowly over the curve of an old chair. The sandpaper whispers as it smooths away the rough edges, stroke after stroke. People say restoration is about patience, about knowing where the grain wants to lead you. But I've learned something deeper. Wood remembers. Every scratch, every dent, every scar has a story written in its grain. You don't erase them. You guide them, fill them, seal them, until they can stand strong again. My life has been much the same. The scars I carry cannot be sanded away. They are carved too deep. But like this chair, I learned that strength isn't about pretending the cracks don't exist. It's about filling them with truth so they hold, so they never break again. When people come to my workshop, they see a grandmother busy with her tools. They don't see the battles fought in silence, the nights endured without light, the weight of secrets carried longer than anyone should. But those secrets, they were never meant to stay hidden. And when the right moment finally came, I did not lift my hands in violence. My revenge was never a fist. It was a sentence spoken calmly at the exact time it needed to be heard. I remember that day as clearly as I remember the smell of this wood polish. The birthday party. The family gathered in pressed clothes, unaware of what truth was about to walk through their doors. My son beside me, tall and steady, his presence like a mirror to a past no one wanted to admit. And then, it happened. The room went silent the moment my son faced the man who once called himself my brother. That silence was louder than any scream, sharper than any blade. It was the sound of chains breaking. It was the sound of truth finally stepping into the light. But my dears, before we reach that day, you must understand how it all began. For even the deepest cracks start with the smallest scratch. In the 1950s, our town sat between low hills and a sky that seemed bigger than any roof could hold. Mornings smelled like bread and sawdust. Afternoons were the color of dust on a sunlit road. Nights, oh my dears, nights were so clear you could count your hopes like stars and still have some left over. My father kept a small workshop off the kitchen, a narrow room lined with clamps and chisels that glinted like tiny moons. He spoke little, but his work spoke for him. He ran his palm over each board as if it were a living thing, testing the grain, listening with his skin. If a chair wobbled, he didn't scold it. He taught it how to stand. From him I learned that touch can be language, and that careful hands can be a kind of prayer. My mother was the soft answer in a hard house. She moved between the wood stove and her sewing table like a song. Stitch, stir, fold, hush. She had the gentlest way of smoothing a collar, of tucking a curl behind a child's ear. But behind her kindness something else lived, something pressed flat and kept quiet. When visitors laughed in our kitchen, she smiled with them. When they left, her smile stayed a moment too long, like a curtain slow to fall. My dears, some silences are not empty. They are crowded rooms. There were 5 of us children. 2 older brothers who walked like they owned the path, and we girls, 2 younger and me in the middle, always trying to be the bridge. We shared one tiny bedroom where the window stuck in summer and whistled in winter. On good days, we braided each other's hair and traded secrets. On bad days, we made promises to meet by the creek if the house felt too tight. The backyard was my true cathedral. An oak stood there as if it had decided once and for all that it would not be moved. In June, the jacaranda lit up like a festival, dropping purple on the grass until our steps left lavender ghosts behind us. A creek slid along the fence line, cool even in August, its water giving back the sky. I kept a treasure box under a loose brick by the porch. Pebbles, a buckle, a paper clip that looked like a heart. Children make museums out of little things. It's how we learn to keep what the day might take. At school, I read loud and clear. Mrs. Davidson said I had a voice that could carry a room without shouting. I liked that. To be heard without having to be big. I liked spelling bees and chalk dust and how the bell made our feet fly. After class, I ran home past the store, past the radio shop, past the neighbor's roses climbing a gate. The world felt honest then. What you saw was what it was, but houses like people can have two faces. In the evenings, Father's radio ruled the living room. We sat straight while the news spoke in perfect sentences. He nodded or frowned, and the room nodded or frowned with him. Mother poured coffee. Brothers traded glances. My sisters and I folded dish towels into small, obedient squares. It all looked normal from the street. Lamplit, curtains drawn, a family in its place. And yet the air had a seam you could trip over if you weren't careful. Mother's eyes would land on mine and then slide away, as if she'd heard a sound only the two of us could hear. She pressed a finger to her lips for no one to see. I pressed one back, just the ghost of a touch, beneath the table where the wood remembered. One Sunday after lunch, we drifted into the yard, the lull of full bellies, the soft hum of a fly, Father's chair creaking in the shade. The oak held its breath. I knelt with my sisters to line shells along the porch step. And then I felt it, not on my skin but in the space around it. A look. Not a glance, not a brother teasing, but a look that measured. I lifted my head. Under the oak's shade, my older brother was leaning against the trunk, arms crossed, watching me in a way that made the sun feel colder. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He only looked, and the ground I trusted shifted a fraction, just enough that, though nothing had happened yet, some part of me began to step back from my own backyard. That was the first scratch. Fear rarely announces itself with thunder. It comes like a draft through a closed window, thin, sneaky, constant, until you start wearing a sweater in summer and calling it normal. After that Sunday under the oak, the air in our house changed shape. My dears, it is a strange thing to grow careful inside your own skin. I learned the roots of safety. Stay where Mother could see me. Keep to the kitchen's bright square. Move in pairs with my sisters. Never be the last one in a room. I timed my steps by the clock. 10 breaths to cross the hall, 5 to check the porch, 3 to swallow whatever wanted to ask why. I spoke less, laughed softer, and listened for things other people couldn't hear. How the floorboard near the pantry sighed, how the gate clicked, how the evening settled on the roof like a held-in cough. School, once my little stage, turned into a place where I hid in plain sight. I still raised my hand, but not as high. I read aloud, but not as bright. My notebook stayed neat, rows of letters marching in perfect lines, as if order on paper could make order at home. Mrs. Davidson tilted her head at me one afternoon. "You used to love the front row," she said, gentle as a hand on a shoulder. What changed? I shrugged and looked at the chalk. How do you explain a shadow to someone standing in the sun? At recess, Ashley and Julia begged me to race across the yard. I pretended the shoelace was loose. I learned to have reasons ready. Sore throat, extra chores, a promise to help the teacher. Lies, when they are small and constant, feel like safety pins, pricking you even as they hold things together. I kept a ledger of defenses, though I never wrote it down. Baggy sweaters to blur the lines of me. Braids wound tight to make me smaller. I slept in layers even in the hot months, as if cotton could be armor. I moved my bed so the headboard touched the wall, so any shift would make a sound and wake me before the house forgot to protect me. The backyard, the jacaranda, the creek, the oak that once felt like a guardian, became a map of don'ts. Don't go behind the shed. Don't be the one to fetch water at dusk. Don't stand where your reflection can betray you in the window. I learned the body's language for no without using my voice. A step sideways, a turned shoulder, a sudden job that needed doing. Some days it worked like a closed door. Some days it only made the latch rattle harder. Mother's silences grew heavier, like quilts stacked in August. She watched Father's face the way a sailor watches the sky, reading wind in the corners of his mouth, predicting weather from the angle of his jaw. Sometimes her eyes found mine, and there was a question there, and an answer, and a prayer. She smoothed the tablecloth twice before supper. She measured coffee too carefully. She was building a raft in her head, I think, plank by plank, without letting anyone see. My dears, there are cages you can draw with sound, and cages you can draw with silence. Evenings were the worst. We moved around each other like furniture. Father's radio spoke the world into tight paragraphs. Spoons tapped bowls. Chairs scraped. I counted those sounds the way a guard counts keys. I learned which neighbor's truck backfired at 6. I learned the small click of our gate when a hand that wasn't Father's set it swinging. And at night the house changed shape. The hallway got longer. The clock got louder. The dark found corners I hadn't known were there. At night the door didn't creak, it whispered a threat. I kept a chair under the knob. I set a hair across the crack to know if someone had been where they shouldn't. I placed my shoes on the rug so the laces pointed to the window, in case I needed to run in my dreams. I told myself, if you can make it to morning, you can make it to the next morning. I told myself, if you stay small enough, maybe the storm will not notice. In the workshop, Father ran his palm along a board and listened for the truth in it. I started doing that with rooms. My hand on the wall, the grain under paint talking to my skin. Here is a weak spot, here is a knot, here the wood will split if pressed too hard. I became a reader of spaces. I became a keeper of exits. One afternoon, Mrs. Davidson asked me to stay after class. "You don't have to tell me anything," she said, eyes kind and careful. "But you can if you want." I opened my mouth and nothing came out. Not even a little piece of the truth. Shame is a heavy book. You think you must carry it alone. I thanked her and left, my smile stitched so neatly it didn't show a single seam. I wish I could tell you the fear stopped when I was clever enough. It did not. It taught me new lessons instead. How to live while holding your breath. How to make a life inside a narrow hallway. How to keep the light in one small corner and promise it you will not let it go out. And then, my dears, a spark appeared where I least expected it. Ordinary, smiling, harmless as a Sunday. A boy at the pharmacy who said my name like it was allowed to be said. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. First, the ledger of defenses would meet a cost I had not yet counted. Friendships don't end with a big goodbye. They fade like chalk in the rain. Ashley stopped waiting for me at the gate. Julia started walking home with the new girl whose mother sold ribbons at the market. It wasn't their fault. I had become hard to reach, a window with the blinds drawn. I made excuses so often they turned into a script I could say without thinking. Mama needs me. We've got company. Headache today? Maybe tomorrow. Lies became a second language, and I spoke it with perfect grammar. At school, I learned how to disappear while sitting in the front row. I handed in neat work, answered when called, and left no fingerprints on the day. In the hallways, girls braided each other's hair and made weekend plans around me, not unkindly, only because I had taught them I would say no. It is a lonely thing to be the one who always has somewhere else to be, even when that somewhere is just a quiet corner where the clock can hear you breathe. Samuel noticed first, not the loud things but the small ones. He saw how I flinched when a door closed too fast. He saw how I kept my back to a wall like it was a friend. He tried to joke me out of it at supper, nudging my elbow, stealing my biscuit, making faces behind Father's back. When I didn't laugh, his smile thinned into worry. My brother had a soft heart that bruised easy. One afternoon, he found me behind the sycamore where the ground stayed damp. "Who did this?" he asked, and he wasn't talking about skinned knees. I shook my head and made my mouth say the safe words. "No one. I fell." He sighed in that way boys do when they want to fix a thing they don't know the name of. For a week, he shadowed me around the yard, sorting nails in Father's shop when I was sent to fetch a hammer, leaning in the doorway when I passed the hall. It helped until it didn't. The house did not like allies. Attention moved through our rooms the way wind moves through wheat, and you can see it if you know how to look. Father's jaw set. Mother's hands fussed too long at the sink. My older brother's eyes held that flat shine that means a storm is nearby. Samuel walked in one evening with a cut on his lip and a bruise he tried to tuck under his collar. "Fell," he said, and we both let the lie sit between us because the truth was heavier and the table had already learned to carry too much. He started coming home later, smelling like the road and the kind of freedom that first tastes like dust. He got a job a county over, then a job beyond that, and the space between his footsteps in our hall grew long. The day he said he was leaving, he kept his voice light. "More pay, more hours, Ma. I'll send money." Mother nodded, counting her own worry like beads on a string. I stood by the door and folded my hands so tight my knuckles ached, as if I could keep him in the room that way. Before he went, Samuel pressed something into my palm. A little pocket knife with one good blade and a dull one that stuck. "For the peach trees," he said, though we both knew peaches don't need steel that sharp. "For the splinters," I answered, playing along. He looked at me too long, and in his eyes I saw the question he still didn't ask. We were good at not naming what hurt us. That was our family's talent. After he left, the house grew louder in the ways that didn't make sound. Chairs felt heavier to move. Windows remembered to stick. The hallway lengthened again. Friends waved from a distance and went on with their shining, ordinary days. I learned to set the table for 6 and feel like a missing tooth. I kept the ledger of defenses with greater care. Baggy sweaters, layered blankets, the chair under the knob, the cotton armor that fooled no one but helped me sleep. Mother's silence became a blanket I couldn't push off. Sometimes, late, I caught her standing in the doorway to our girls' room, counting our breaths as if to prove we were still here. She would touch the doorframe twice, a small ritual I didn't understand then, a woman's way of building a fence where none could be seen. I moved quieter, breathed smaller, practiced making my face a clean wall. In daylight, I helped Father sort dowels and listen to the wood's better language, how a board can be taught to hold, how a split can be filled, how a joint can be made true. In the evenings, I stitched hems with Mother while the radio read the world like it was a book that always turned the page on time. We all looked like people in a painting, still, composed, caught in a moment that would not admit motion. When letters came from Samuel, they smelled like gasoline and hope. He wrote about a ranch, open sky, pay in cash, a buddy with a spare cot. He never wrote about me, not exactly, but he drew a small star in the corner of every page, and I chose to believe it meant, "I see you. I am still here." The morning the last letter came for a while, I stood under the oak in a dress that didn't feel like mine, the jacaranda dropping purple confetti at my feet, and I understood that some celebrations are the kind you have to throw for yourself just to keep standing. I hid the pocket knife under the loose porch brick with my treasure box. I traced the blade with my finger and felt how a simple edge can make a path through anything that wants to tangle you. When hope left with Samuel, I learned how to breathe without air. The pharmacy sat on the corner like a dependable thought. Glass jars, neat labels, a bell above the door that rang the same way every time. I went for Mother's pills and the small things a house needs to keep pretending it's fine. That's where I met Wyatt. He said my name the way a good clerk says a price. clear, simple, without taking more than needed. He had a kind face, sun-browned at the edges, and a way of sliding the paper bag across the counter as if he were returning something he owed me. "How's your mama doing?" he asked, and somehow the question landed like a chair pulled out for me at a table I didn't think I was invited to. We spoke of ordinary things: weather, the new radio programs, how the lilacs near the post office smelled sweeter after rain. The world shrank to a safe square between the cash register and the peppermint jar. For 10 minutes, I remembered how it felt to be a girl who could be seen without being measured. He offered me lemonade one Sunday, nothing scandalous, just the park bench by the bandstand, people strolling, children chasing a kite that kept trying to be a bird. I said yes because the word felt like it belonged in my mouth again. We talked about futures that were made of school and work and decent pay, the kind that come on buses and wear simple shoes. He told me he wanted to open his own pharmacy one day, a place where people leave feeling lighter, he said. I held that sentence like a coin in my fist all the way home. But light draws notice. The look from the oak had learned new rooms. It found me in the hallway, in the pantry's shadow, on the path between our house and the road. The threat did not shout. It pressed its thumb into a bruise no one else could see. "You like him?" The words were quiet, but they carried a hook. I lowered my eyes to the linoleum and felt the ledger of defenses flip to a blank page. I lied the way the body breathes without thinking. "Just a friend." The answer bought me a day, then another. But lies, my dears, are leaky boats. You can paddle hard and still feel the water rise around your ankles. I told Wyatt I was promised to someone in Santa Monica, a simple story with edges rounded for safety. His smile faltered, not from pride hurt, but from something like respect. He took my word and didn't push. "I hope he's good to you," he said. I nodded. The bell above the pharmacy door rang as I left. I stood outside under the awning and let the rain touch my face so my tears could have company. Soon after, my body began to draw its own map. Morning turned sour on my tongue. Bread smelled like memory instead of comfort. Dresses that once hung loose now asked questions at the waist. I counted days the way a shopkeeper counts change. I placed my palm against my belly and understood before I allowed the word to form. Life, small and insistent, had chosen me to be its room. Fear came first, sharp and dizzy. Then a quiet opened inside me, like a church when no one is there yet and the candles are waiting. I thought of doors, how some must be closed and some must be walked through. I thought of names, how they can heal or harm, how a future can begin with a word spoken over a cradle instead of a threat whispered through a keyhole. The house felt tighter by the hour. The ledger of defenses could not cover what would soon show. I saw the path before I could bear to admit it. Leave. Not as a runaway with pockets full of panic, but as a mother carrying a promise. The plan formed itself the way a good joint comes together. Measure twice, cut once, fit clean, save coins, hide a change of clothes, memorize a bus schedule. Pick a day the church would take girls to the city. Step away when the bell is loudest. I pressed my hand to the kitchen table Father had made. Oak, steady, honest. And I told the wood the truth I could not yet say aloud. I am going. Not only for me, for the child who will not inherit my cage. The church bus smelled like hymnals and winter wool. I sat near the back with the other girls, a shawl pulled close, hands folded the way good daughters fold them. We were going to a holiday convention in the city, songs, candles, speeches that promised peace on earth. Peace is a beautiful word, my dears, but sometimes it's a cover you borrow while you pack a different life. When we reached Los Angeles, the streets glittered with stalls and strings of lights. I helped carry boxes into the parish house, nodded at instructions, smiled when spoken to, and waited for the moment a crowd becomes a cloak. I slipped out for water, turned left at the candle vendor, right at the toy drums, and kept walking until the carols thinned into bus noise. The Greyhound terminal was a lit-up cave full of stories that wanted to change their endings. I bought a ticket to Bakersfield with bills that had lived too long tucked beneath a loose floorboard. The woman behind the glass did not ask questions. She stamped a time on my future and slid it back to me. Buses teach you how big a country can be and how small you can feel crossing it. I watched night pull past the window. Billboards, orchards, a moon that couldn't decide which fields to bless. I held the paper bag with my extra dress and the last of my coins and pressed my palm to my belly each time the road dipped, as if my hand could be both map and guardrail. Bakersfield greeted me with cold and neon. The terminal benches were hard and honest. They did not pretend to be beds. I slept and didn't sleep, waking for footsteps, for announcements, for the sound my fear made when it remembered my name. Morning came anyway, without asking who I was now. I walked until the city felt less interested in me. I asked at 3 boarding houses and learned how fast a face closes when it hears single and sees expecting. By late afternoon, I had nothing left to trade but the truth and my own labor. That's when I found the old house set back from the street, its paint remembering better years, its porch holding on. She opened the door with a careful look, the kind people wear when they've had to measure strangers before. White hair pulled into a knot, hands like folded paper, eyes that had counted more goodbyes than she ever told. "What do you need, child?" she asked. "Work," I said, "and a place to sleep that isn't a bench." She looked past me, as if the road itself might answer. "Name's Beatrice. I've got a small room in back that used to hold my husband's fishing gear. It's no bigger than a promise, but it's dry. You help in the kitchen, you sweep the stairs, you mind your manners, and we'll see. Dignity is bred when you have had only crumbs." I said yes to every condition before she finished listing them. The room had a narrow bed, a crooked window, a nail on the wall that stood in for a closet. I put my bag on the chair and felt something inside me set down its weight, if only for the night. Beatrice fed me a bowl of soup that tasted like someone believing you. She didn't ask where I came from. She asked when I could start. "Morning," I said. "Earlier, if you like," she nodded. "Mornings are a good way to keep company with yourself," she said, and I heard the shape of a story she wasn't telling. That first evening, I folded towels warm from a line, scrubbed a pot until Copper woke up, and made a little altar of the 3 things I owned that felt like hope: my comb, a handkerchief, and a tiny cross. When the house settled and the hallway light clicked off, I lay still and counted baby breaths and the quiet between them. Somewhere after midnight, a car door shut in the street. Footsteps paused at the gate, then moved on. Nothing happened, and still my heart ran. You learn in a life like this to hear tomorrow before it knocks. Pain recognizes pain, my dears, and trouble has a way of reading the same maps you do. The knock would come. Not that night, but soon enough. I closed my eyes and held the future with both hands. It came the way dread always comes, on time. The clock in Beatrice's hallway had just cleared 12 when someone hit the door with 3 hard knuckles. Not a guest's rap, but a claim. I was sitting on the edge of the narrow bed, both hands around a cup of water that had gone warm. The knock made the glass ring like a small bell at a funeral. Beatrice's slippers whispered across the floorboards. She did not turn on the lamp. She knew the house by heart and danger by sound. I stood without meaning to, as if my bones had learned to rise when trouble called their name. A man's voice, tight as wire. "I'm looking for my sister." I felt the old air find me, the hallway from home, the held breath, the weight of a gaze you cannot wash off. Beatrice set the chain, opened the door a hand's width. "You've got the wrong place," she said, polite as Sunday, firm as Monday. "She's young," the voice insisted. "Ran off. She's carrying—" Folks said she came through here. Through the crack, I could see his outline. Hat brim, set shoulders, the kind of posture that belongs to men who never met a boundary they did not mistake for permission. My brother could turn words into walls. He was building one now, brick by brick, expecting the town to lend him mortar. Beatrice didn't blink. "This is a respectable house. I keep working men and their pay on time. I don't keep daughters who don't belong to me." She let the sentence sit a moment, then added softer, "And even if I did, it wouldn't be your door to open." Silence stretched. I could hear the street breathing, late tires, a dog deciding not to bark. He tried a different key. "I can pay to look." "That's not a currency we take here," she said, and closed the door until chain met wood with a quiet, final sound. The lock slid home like a truth told all the way. For a long beat we stayed as we were, me in the half-dark with my cup, Beatrice with her palm flat against the door as if feeling for aftershocks. Then she turned, eyes finding mine in the dim. "Pack," she said simply. "Men like that don't stop because a night tells them no." In the morning light, the house looked unchanged, stair runner straight, coffee hot, but the map had shifted. Beatrice sat me at the kitchen table, spread a county atlas like a quilt. "My brother Dale hauls freight east," she said. "Tucson by way of the river. He can put you in the cab, 3 days of road and enough miles to teach a new sky your name." "A river," I murmured, palm on the page where the blue line bent south. I thought of the bridge back home, the creek that had cooled my ankles as a child. Water remembers where it's been and still moves forward. I need to put a river between the past and the future. Beatrice nodded. "Good, say it out loud. It helps the road hear you coming." We planned small so the plan could hold. Roll your dress tight, pin coins in your hem, keep your name simple, sleep when the truck sleeps, wake when the truck wakes. Beatrice wrote a number on an envelope and tucked a few bills inside with a biscuit wrapped in a napkin. "For the first corner in the new place," she said. "Buy a loaf, buy a crib, buy anything that says this room is yours." That afternoon, Dale arrived with diesel on his sleeves and kindness in his pockets. He tipped his cap, looked at me once, not the measuring look, but the respectful kind that leaves a person whole, and loaded my small bag like it weighed what it did, almost nothing and everything. Before I climbed into the cab, I went back to the little room and ran my hand along the windowsill. The grain under paint spoke the way wood speaks when you listen with your palm. Forward, forward, forward. Grain runs forward. I repeated it until the words felt like a tool I could carry. We rolled out at dusk, the truck gathering the road, the river keeping pace somewhere to our right. Bakersfield fell behind the mirrors. Beatrice grew small on the porch and then became part of the house again, the way good people become part of the places they protect. Night opened and did not scare me for once. I counted mile markers and baby breaths, matched them up like dovetails, the kind that hold even when a life turns. Arizona waited past the dark, a city where my name could mean something new, and there, my dears under a different sky, a boy would find his first light, and I would find my hands again. Not just for surviving, but for building. Tucson met me with sun that didn't apologize. The streets ran straight toward low mountains, and the sky behaved like an open door. Dale dropped me at a small house where a woman named Dorothy rented rooms to women who needed a place to put their names down. The room smelled of lemon oil and fresh sheets. I paid a month in advance and stood in the doorway a moment. letting the word mine settle into the corners. Work came the way humble things do, by hand and by habit. Mr. Peterson, who owned a general store downtown, needed help sorting stock and keeping books. His eyes were too tired to read. I told him I could count, lift, and keep quiet. "Good," he said, kind without fuss. "That's 3 of the 4 things a shop needs." He never asked about the missing 4th, and I never told him it was luck. Days found a rhythm. Sweep, tally, ring the bell, thank the customer, learn the shelves by feel. Tucson taught me the comfort of routine, the way a task done well can hold your mind steady. At night, I sewed tiny shirts from scrap fabric Dorothy saved in a biscuit tin. My stitches improved under the same patience I once watched in my father's hands. Measure true, then commit. The child inside me moved like a small fish testing a pond. I learned his tides, how he liked me standing better than sitting, how he tapped when the noon whistle blew, how he rested when I sang the old songs I pretended I'd forgotten. Fear still lived nearby, but it didn't run the house. Each morning I told it to wait on the porch while I went about making a life. Labor began on a windless evening when the mountains turned purple and the air smelled faintly of rain that hadn't arrived. The first pain surprised me not with its strength, but with its honesty. "I am here," it said. "Do this with me." Dorothy called her neighbor, a midwife with sure hands and a voice like a kettle just before it sings. "Breathe where it hurts," she told me. "Make room for him to turn." Time pulled long and then gathered tight. I squeezed the edge of the table my father had taught me to trust in other forms, and found courage where the wood should have been. There was heat and work, and a moment I thought I would split along the seam I'd kept hidden all my life. Then the room stilled, like a shop just after closing, when all the items are finally where they belong. A cry, thin then certain. They placed him on my chest, and he looked at me with that first serious look babies give, the one that checks if the world is safe enough to begin. "Hello?" I whispered, because some names need to be earned by speaking softly first. He was warm as fresh bread and new as a good idea. The midwife asked what I would call him. I had kept a few names in my pocket, turning them like coins, waiting to see which felt like payment and which felt like promise. "Daniel," I said, "the prophet who slept among hungry mouths and came out whole, a name that means God is my judge when men have judged too quickly." I pressed my lips to his forehead. "Daniel," I repeated, and then the pledge that would build our house more than any nail. "You will never carry my shame." In the weeks after, I learned a different clock, one that runs on hunger and lullabies, on wash lines and the long patience of night. I brought a basket to the store and tucked it behind the counter. Customers leaned over to peek and left with more than groceries, some left with softer voices. Mr. Peterson set a stool for me and called it an investment in inventory. Kindness can be so practical when people let it. Money was thin, but dignity multiplied. I began to take home small, broken things customers wanted to throw away. A wobbling stool, a cracked jewelry box, a chair with one leg shorter than its truth. In the back room, I found sandpaper and glue, clamps, and a little tin of beeswax. The first time I smoothed a scar from a chair's arm, the grain spoke up like an old friend. Work with me, not against me. I listened. I filled the split with patience and truth until the line held. Soon, people brought pieces on purpose. "Can you fix this?" It belonged to my grandmother. I said yes because I knew what it meant to belong to someone who didn't keep you safe, and what a grace it is to be made steady again. Wood became my prayer, my therapy, my living. Each restoration taught me the same lesson from a different angle. You don't erase what happened. You make it part of what holds. Daniel grew, and so did my hands. I learned how to read a board by its shine and a day by its quiet. In Tucson, I wasn't a girl running. I was a mother building. And the workshop in my mind became a room you could walk into, set down your burden, and leave with something made strong by being seen. Arthur arrived in our days the way morning light finds a clean counter, quietly and as if it had always meant to. He came to the store for bolts and oil, for coffee and conversation he never demanded. He had a mechanic's patience and a widower's carefulness, the kind that doesn't touch a thing until it's sure the thing wants touching. Daniel liked him first. Children are good at reading torque and intent. On Sundays, Arthur would stop by with a tackle box that rattled like a song and a smile he wore only halfway, just to see if it fit. "Brought a busted toy truck," he'd say, offering Daniel a small screwdriver like a key. "Think we can make the wheels agree with each other?" The two of them bent over metal and plastic. Daniel's brow gathered into the same important line it made when he learned new words. "Lefty-loosey," Arthur murmured, and my boy repeated it like a verse. Screws gave up their stubbornness. Axles remembered how to be straight. Small things returned to working like the world meant it. Trust, after a life like mine, is a tool you keep in the back of the drawer. You reach for it with 2 fingers and set it down twice before you use it. Arthur never asked for it. He let it grow like a plant that prefers shade, watered by consistency, not speeches. He brought fish wrapped in yesterday's news, taught Daniel to clean a reel, showed him how a gasket seals because it's soft enough to give and firm enough not to fail. Balance, he'd say. Everything worth keeping has some. At the store, Mr. Peterson watched the 3 of us the way men who've seen storms watch a sky that's finally clear. He gave Arthur a nod that meant, "I approve of this weather." Our home learned new sounds, socket wrenches clicking, 2 laughs where there used to be one, the soft thud of boots by the door that were not a warning. I kept waiting for the other kind of sound, the one that turns a room into a trap. It didn't come. Still, I took trust out in small pieces and sanded the edges. I let Arthur fix the back step. I let him leave a jar of nails on the kitchen shelf. I let him carry the heavy bag without believing it meant he now carried me. Then school sent home the family tree assignment. Daniel laid the worksheet on the table between us like a map that stopped at a cliff. "We have to put names," he said, steady voice, serious eyes. "All the branches." The room went quiet in that particular way paper can make it. I felt my mouth go dry, the old hallway returning for a visit. There are truths you can't cut to fit without breaking something else. There are lies that keep weather off the bed long enough for a child to sleep. "Your father's name was Michael," I said, choosing the gentlest version of a door that should not be opened yet. "He was a good man. He died before you were born." Daniel held my gaze, weighing the plank I'd just laid across a gap. He nodded, once adult as a handshake. "What did he like?" he asked. "Music," I answered, and gave my son a father who whistled while he worked, who liked the smell of oranges, who would have loved the way Daniel's mind fits pieces together until they make sense. I built a man who would have been safe to remember. The pencil moved. Branches found leaves I had made for them. That night, Arthur stood in the doorway, the quiet around him more comfort than space. "You don't owe me what hurts," he said, "but I can hold what you hand me." He didn't push. He never did. Instead, he went to the sink, washed 2 mugs and set them upside down to drip. A small sermon in domestic acts. Seasons did their honest work. Daniel's hands grew sure. He could true a bicycle wheel, patch a hose, and bring a radio back from its sulk. The 3 of us learned a schedule made of dinners that stayed warm long enough to finish the story being told. On Saturdays, I took on bigger furniture, wardrobes whose backs had come loose from their truths, tables that needed the courage of one more brace. Arthur planed edges I measured, and Daniel fed us screws like a priest with wafers. We were not pretending to be a family. We were doing the work families do and calling it a day. Sometimes late, with the house breathing even and soft. I'd run a finger along the seam of a restored chair and remember how wood teaches, joinery strong because two pieces agree on where they meet. I wanted that for us. Agreement, not ownership. Strength, not show. When Daniel turned in the family tree, he brought it home folded once, careful as a letter from the future. The teacher had written beautiful work in the margin. I set the paper on the mantel and understood the danger of my own crafting. Lies can be shelter. They can also be damp. I kissed my boy's temple and blew out the lamp. In the cool that followed, the truth sat up in the dark and looked at me like a patient carpenter, waiting for me to admit what every house learns in time. Lies keep out the storm and invite mold. The bell over the store door rang its small, faithful note, and I looked up expecting a regular. Mrs. Diaz for flour, Mr. Hal for the good nails. Instead, Time walked in wearing a dress the color of a remembered morning. She held a basket and a question on her face. It took 3 heartbeats to recognize my own past standing there. "Abigail?" she said, soft and startled at once. My hands forgot the price of sugar. "Caroline," I breathed, and the room changed sizes. She was older in the way women grow. Eyes wiser, laughter lines holding stories. But the tilt of her head was still the girl who used to hide with me by the creek and trade guesses about cloud shapes. We stood in the aisle between coffee and soap like 2 pages that had been separated and now found their binding again. We closed early, a sign on the door promising to return after lunch. At my kitchen table, she held her cup the way you hold something you're willing to lose if it means telling the truth. "We thought you died," she said. "You vanished from that church trip. The police, the posters, Mama prayed with both hands." Her voice trembled and became a whisper. "He looked for you harder than anyone. We didn't need to name he. The house we came from had trained us to speak around certain words." "Where is everyone now?" I asked, steadying myself on the rim of the cup. "Daddy's gone," she said. 5 years now. His tools are still on the pegboard like he might walk back in." She swallowed. "Martin took over. Expanded. Stores in Malibu, Santa Monica, Ventura. People think he's a wonder. Donates to the parade, sits up front at church, shakes hands like a mayor. He married well. 2 children. The paper wrote about him. Self-made, they said. The phrase hit me like a cold wind through old wood. Self-made. Men build empires out of silence, and the world applauds the architecture. My dear's injustice has a polished face. It smiles for photographs. I listened to my sister speak the tidy version of a life that had fed on our disorder. As she talked, something in me that had been sleeping sat up and turned on the light. Not rage, purpose. Purpose knows the weight of a hammer and the difference between building and breaking. When Caroline left, promising not to tell Mother yet, promising to return, I stood a long time at the counter where coins become change, and change becomes bread. Then I went home and set out 2 mugs without thinking. Arthur arrived with dust on his sleeves and a good day in his pocket. He saw my face and put the pocket away. "Tell me where it hurts," he said. So I did. Not every board, not every nail, but the frame and the load it had carried. I told him about the look that became a cage, the running, the river, the boy whose first serious gaze had made me brave. I did not spare the part where men call harm by simple names. The house listened. The clock forgot to tick. Arthur's hands were still on the table, but his knuckles had gone white. "No one touches my family," he said, not loud, not quiet, just true. He was not a man who made speeches. He was a man who made repairs. He reached across the map of our years and set his palm over mine, a clamp that held without hurting. If you want to forget, we forget. If you want to fight, we fight. But it's your truth. It moves when you say. His words laid a foundation under something I had only been daring to imagine. I thought of names written and not written. I thought of ledgers, debts, dues, the columns where you decide what gets carried forward. The town had praised a facade because it never looked behind it. What if a door opened in public where secrets pretend to be fine china? In the weeks that followed, Caroline returned with news and photographs that smelled faintly of someone else's living room. Mama was turning 70 the next spring. A hall had been rented. The list of invitees was long enough to look like a prayer and a trap. I turned the paper in my hands and saw not a party, but a place where sound would carry. A room with a microphone and 200 witnesses. A ledger about to be read aloud. At night, while Daniel slept and the house kept its promise to be safe, I sketched the plan the way I sketch a restoration. Gather what's true, set the clamps. Apply pressure where the joint has lied. Let the glue cure in the light. I would not shout. I would not break. I would name. I stood at the workbench and rubbed beeswax into a chair rail until dull became shine. The grain rose to meet my cloth. Lines that had always been there, waiting to be noticed. Soon, I said to the wood, to myself, to the girl who survived by staying small and the woman who had learned to stand. We will do this the right way, in the right room, with the right words. The plan did not leap. It set. Like joinery done well, it held because truth, once fit to size and pressed into place, does not let go. Spring came early that year, the kind that makes a porch board creak like it remembers dancing. Caroline mailed the invitation the way you carry a lit candle. Careful, 2 hands. Mother's 70th. A rented hall with chandeliers that turned ordinary air to celebration. A microphone. A guest book. A family gathered like it had nothing to confess. My dears, some rooms are built for cake. Some are built for truth. I cleared a space on my work table and brought out the small, stubborn pieces I had kept across decades. Artifacts saved like screws in a jar. A bus ticket stub whose ink had outlasted the night it bought me. A folded letter from a landlady with courage in her cursive. A receipt with a date that proved where I was when a different story was told about me. A church program with a name printed wrong, the error that let me slip away. Not weapons, evidence, not to wound, but to hold the shape of what happened when the room tried to forget. I laid them in a row and read them like boards, checking for true. Truth, like joinery, fits when measured with care. I practiced speaking one sentence aloud in the quiet shop, the way you test a clamp before the glue sets. Calm, clean, nothing extra. I didn't want drama. I wanted daylight. Arthur stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes steady. You don't have to do this, he said, not as an exit, but as a last check of the ladder before I climbed. I know, I answered, and felt the certainty arrive like a chair that finally stops wobbling. But the room is ready, and so am I. Daniel was a man by then, broad in the shoulders, gentle in the ways that matter. I told him enough to make him steady, not enough to make him drown. We're going home, I said, to celebrate your grandmother. People will look hard, and they may hear more than they expected. He didn't ask for names. He asked, "Where do you want me to stand?" The question rested in my chest like a hand placed exactly where you hurt. Near me, I said. Left side. He nodded, as if we were testing a table for balance. We packed with purpose. Arthur's good jacket that made his vows look ironed. My blue dress that fit like respect. Daniel's shirt the color of clear water. I tucked the envelope of artifacts into my sewing tin, then into my bag, then into a pocket close enough to feel. I wasn't afraid of losing them. I was afraid of forgetting I no longer needed to. The road to Malibu felt like touching an old scar. You know it's yours, but you don't live there anymore. Hills I once counted from the schoolyard lined up like witnesses who had finally learned to face the front. The jacaranda were not yet in full bloom, but their buds promised purple. The creek where I used to cool my ankles ran on as if nothing had happened. Water is stubborn about being water. We arrived a day early. Caroline had made ready a small room at her house where the bedspread smelled of line-dried sun. We went over the plan in the kitchen, voice low, dishes drying like eavesdroppers too polite to repeat. The program would place family remarks just after the second song. There would be a silence meant for sentiment. I would use it for truth. That evening, Daniel found me on the porch, my fingers worrying the edge of the sewing tin, the way old habits ask for one last dance. He sat beside me, the boards holding us both. "Mom?" he said, and his voice was steady as a level on a carpenter's bench. "If something happens, do you want me to speak or let you?" I looked at his profile, Arthur's calm, my stubborn, and saw the man the boy had been building toward all along. He asked one question that told me he already knew. I took his hand and placed it on top of the tin. "If I falter," I said, "you say my name." "That will be enough." We slept. Morning came like it always does for those who invite it and those who don't. When we dressed, I pinned my hair the way Mother once pinned a collar, firm, kind, exact. We walked to the hall together, 3 people with a single purpose. At the door, I touched the threshold with the tips of my fingers, listening the way Father taught me to listen to wood. The grain ran forward. Halls that expect cake have a certain brightness. Polished floors, folded napkins, a microphone waiting like a patient usher. We stepped inside and the air thinned to that careful, quiet people make when they want to be seen being kind. The pianist tested 3 notes. A child laughed and was shushed. I felt the seam of the day under my feet, tight and true. Caroline met us near the guest book and squeezed my hand twice, the old signal from nights we braved thunder together. Mother sat near the front in a dress the color of cream, hair pinned the way she used to pin ours for church, small pearls steady at her ears. She was older and softer around the edges, but her eyes still kept count of the room. When she saw me, her hand flew to her mouth. For a heartbeat, she stayed upright against astonishment, and then the color slipped from her face like a curtain. Chairs scraped. Women hurried. Someone said water as if water could fix the past. Mother came back to us in shallow breaths, reaching for my cheeks, for proof. "Abigail," she said, and the name trembled in the light. "Oh, child." Across the hall he turned. Time did nothing to the shape of his certainty. He wore success like a tailored coat, polished shoes, a nod the town had learned to follow. His eyes flashed like a knife trying to be a spoon. He looked at me second. He looked at Daniel first. My son stood a half step to my left, as we had planned, steady as the table Arthur built that never once wobbled. The room pulled tighter, a drumhead waiting for a strike. Daniel's face bore the calm of a man who knows which beam carries the load. The 2 of them faced each other, mirror grain meeting across a lifetime's board. The resemblance was the kind truth uses when words try to hide. The MC said, "Family remarks," and the microphone blinked its red eye. I walked to it as if to a familiar workbench. I didn't rush. I didn't slow. I opened the envelope and set it on the lectern the way you set hardware out in size order. Bus stub, letter, receipt. Small facts shining like good screws in a jar. "Thank you for honoring my mother," I began, voice even, tempered by years and sanding. "Some of you know me. Some of you think you do. I left this town as a girl without a voice. I have come back as a woman with one." Chairs settled. Breaths held. I felt Arthur's presence at my back the way you feel a wall you trust. Daniel did not move. He did not need to. He was already doing the work I had asked. Be the witness whose existence cannot be argued. I turned my head, found him, the man the town called a pillar. I used his name once, clean as a cut. Then I spoke the sentence I had practiced in 100 rooms. This is my son, Daniel. Some of you may notice he carries the face of his father, my brother. Silence fell with a pin drop sound, the kind you remember forever because it weighs more than noise. Then the room cracked open. A woman gasped like a door unlatched. A glass found the floor. Mother wept without sound, only breath, as if each inhale carried years out with it. My aunts shifted in their chairs, hands flying to throats that suddenly found their beads. He made a sound I had not heard since I was young, a low, cornered noise that does not belong to language. He lunged not at me, but toward the proof that had stolen his last alibi. 2 men rose, uncles who had once nodded when he spoke, and restrained him, not cruelly, but firmly, the way you clamp a joint that wants to torque itself loose. Easy, one said, and the word meant enough. He started to speak and found no trustworthy words. Denial wobbled under the weight of a face the room could compare without help. The MC looked at me, pleading for a script that could return the day to cake. I gave him the only one that mattered. I have kept this quiet so others could sleep, I said, still calm. Silence is not a kindness when it hides a debt. I am paying mine in full, here, where the ledger is public. I did not list the nights. I did not unwrap the darkness. I named what needed naming and stopped where dignity begins. I held up the letter that had found me shelter, the receipt that proved my absence when lies said otherwise, the bus stub that carried a girl to a life wide enough to become this woman. Evidence is not vengeance. It is simply daylight. In the far corner, a neighbor dropped his eyes, remembering the time he didn't see. A former teacher bit her lip, as if a question from long ago had finally been answered. People do not like to admit how often they file suspicions under not my business. The town felt its weight shift and understood the true joists at last. When it was done, I folded the artifacts back into the envelope. I didn't look at him again. I looked at my mother and saw a breaking that was also a mending. She nodded once, permission, apology, prayer. What followed did not play like theater. Contracts loosened. Handshakes hesitated. Suppliers forgot to return calls. A chair at the head table went empty longer than it used to. His empire didn't fall with flames. It ended with witnesses. Reputation is a structure held up by other people's belief. Remove the load-bearing lies and it cannot stand. We left the hall the way we entered, together, measured steps, no rush, no fear. Outside, the evening remembered how to be evening. I touched the threshold with the tips of my fingers and felt what the wood said back. Not triumph, not ruin, true. My dears, revenge the way I understand it is not spectacle. It is a truth spoken where it must be heard, at a cost you have counted, so that what needs ending ends, and what deserves to begin finally can. These days begin simple. I make coffee, open the back door, and let the morning check on my flowers. Then I walk to the workshop, where the air smells like wood and patience. People bring me what their families were about to give up on. Rockers with a limp, drawers that stick, tables that have forgotten how to hold conversation. I run my hand along the grain and say, let's see what we can save. Word travels. The shop has a reputation now, not for making things new, but for making them honest. Life did not become a storybook because I spoke the truth. It became real. I went to therapy the way you go to physical therapy after a break. Slow, steady. Let the ache tell you where to work. I learned the names of what I'd carried. Naming didn't erase the weight, but it let me set it down in the right place. Arthur and I kept the kind of marriage that prefers ordinary days done well. When the sickness came for him, we met it together, and when he went where I cannot follow yet, he left me a house built on enough. Daniel became the kind of man a town is proud to claim. He married a good woman who teaches numbers like they're bridges anyone can cross. They gave me grandchildren who show up hungry and leave full of stories. On Sundays, the porch is loud again. Cards on the table, shoes by the steps, a little one asleep on my chest the way his father once did. When I look at him, I remember the promise I made long ago. You will never carry my shame. I kept it. He carries joy and mud on his knees, and a talent for taking apart radios. As for the man this town once called a pillar, time did what time does. His business thinned, not from curses but from customers choosing clarity. His name stopped opening doors. He moved to a smaller house at the edge of the map, where silence finally had to learn his company. I do not celebrate that. His decline is not my healing. My healing is mine, built from truth, held by love, maintained with practice. People ask if I ever wish the past were different. I tell them wishing is for weather. What we have is work. In Japan, they mend broken pottery with lacquer mixed with gold. The crack remains, outlined bright. I think of that often, kintsugi by truth. We did not hide the breaks. We filled them with honesty. The lines are still there, but they hold. So here I am, hands stained with wax, a radio humming low, sunlight turning sawdust into glitter. The chair beneath me does not wobble. Neither do I. My life is not unscarred. It is well joined. If this story felt true, share the moment someone finally believed you. Your words might be the light for someone's dark room. Subscribe for more fact-checked family sagas.